Hello and welcome to another Stacey West video. This one's not going out live, but it is especially just for you YouTube guys. So this is just a YouTube video, not going out on a podcast. I am looking at the 10 worst loan signings of the EFL era for Lincoln City. Now, before we get started, let me just put a little bit of criteria out there. First of all, the EFL era is 2017 onwards. So we dropped out of the Football League as it was in 2011. When we came back, it was the EFL. So it's anything from 2017 onwards. So anybody that we signed from the summer of 2017 when we came back into the Football League right the way through to this summer. Lots and lots of scope. Lots of transfer windows. 16 transfer windows, I believe, all in all. 8 summer, 8 winter windows, not including this summer. So 16 transfer windows. Now, in order for a player to be one of the worst loan signings, I'm discounting one or two players, the likes of Archie Mayer and the likes of James Brown. So loan players who were brought in purely as cover with no real expectation. TJ Ioma would make that list if we hadn't also signed him. Those kind of loan players that come in, it's almost like a developmental loan for them. They're around a different club, but their game time is going to be hugely limited. So this player has got to have played at least one game for the club whilst on loan. And at that point, then we can differentiate between what makes a player bad, what makes a player worse. It's bound to be a point of discussion. Now, remember, just because I'm putting them on this list of the 10 worst loan signings in Lincoln City's EFL era history, it doesn't mean they're bad players. I'm not criticising these players directly. I'm criticising their spell at Lincoln City. I'm also not criticising their actual recruitment. Really important to note that. In fact, some of these players, when we recruited them, were so highly rated that that's why they're disappointing. We've got players on this list who scored League One goals for Lincoln City. But it's really important to remember that the kind of the fanfare or the expectation when they sign often is part of why they're disappointing. It's why I named Jamie Robson as my most disappointing Lincoln City signing of the EFL era, when there's so many other players who have been bad, so many other players who haven't gone on to big things. Jamie Robson actually turned as a profit, but for me was so disappointing because of the way that he left. He left for a club that ended up in the National League when he came in really as a big money buy. He was the first Ethan Arahan signed with a view to kind of hopefully doubling, tripling our money, and it didn't work. That's why he was disappointing. But why are these 10 players disappointing? I know what you're here for. We're 3 minutes in. Let's get on with the list. At number 10, it's goalkeeper Sam Slocombe. Now, Sam had some pedigree when he came to us. He had played 3 championship games for Scunthorpe United, and then he had played 100-odd games for them across League One. He was ever present when they were promoted from League Two in 2013-14, playing 46 games. He then played 23 games for Oxford in League Two, 34 for Blackpool in a playoff campaign in League Two, moved to Bristol Rovers, 25 games over 2 seasons, and then came on loan to us. We were a League Two side at the time. And we were hunting for a fresh goalkeeper, a new goalkeeping angle. This is in the 2018-19 season. So it's actually our title-winning season. We'd had Ryan Alsop come in the season before. Josh Vickers was our number one. We later went for Matt Gilks, who came in and did really well. And really, ever since then, we've done very well with goalkeepers. I've mentioned Archie Mayer, who came in and didn't really play. You could say he had a mare, boom, boom, boom. But Sam Slocombe came in with some real pedigree. So I expected him to be challenging for the number one shirt. And I think a lot of people did. And actually, he had a really poor time at Lincoln City. He made his debut as we lost 2-1 at home to Mansfield. Tyler Walker scoring. Michael O'Connor, I think, was sent off in that game after 90 minutes. It was 1-1 after 8 minutes, by the way, that game. He then played against Scunthorpe away when we drew 1-1. We won on penalties, but we had James Wilson sent off that day as well. Then against Wolves under 21s, he absolutely didn't impress as we drew 2-2 with them. And then finally, he played in that bizarre Accrington game that's famous for so many different reasons. For instance, Tom Shaw making his last senior appearance, Jamie McCoon making his last senior appearance and scoring. But unfortunately, Sam Slocombe just wasn't impressive at all. So I think when he came in, there was intent for him to go on and do what Matt Gilks did. He was an established goalkeeper. He's obviously gone on since to play, I think, for the likes of Notts County in the National League, who he made 145 appearances for, and had a couple of mares for them, by the way, when they failed to come up through the playoffs as well. So I just think that he was a loan signing that we expected quite a bit more from. And in the end, he ended up probably being nothing more than an EFL goalkeeper, and we could have signed a young goalkeeper like an Archie Mayer to do exactly the same job. Jordan McGuire Drew. We're going right back now to the summer of 2017. And when this signing was announced, I was excited. I think he scored 16 goals for Dagenham and Redbridge the season before, 14 of those in the National League. He'd been a real thorn in our side. Tricky winger. Really looked like he had got the right pedigree. He was a Brighton and Hove Albion player. And just he just looked like he had absolute quality. And when he arrived, I felt that was us stepping up. When you step up a division and the top player from the division that you've just come out of wants to join you, almost like Tyler Walker signing a year later. So Jordan McGuire Drew, I was super excited with. We played a system that would suit him with kind of wide attackers. It just seemed nailed on that he was going to be a massive success. And to be honest, his spell with us was absolutely appalling. He did score twice, both of them against Everton Kids in the EFL Trophy. He made 11 appearances in League Two, one appearance in the League Cup, and he was just terrible. He had an awful touch. He struggled to beat a player. He just didn't look like he was ever going to make the grade at our level. And we curtailed his loan very early. Now, bear in mind, this is a season we still made the playoffs, and we still ended up getting to the EFL Trophy final and winning the competition. We also had other loan players, the likes of Josh Gianelli. We'd signed Billy Knott, who I said was one of our worst signings as well. So it was a tough summer. But McGuire Drew and Billy Knott on paper looked like massive, massive signings, really creative players. And unfortunately, McGuire Drew just never, ever delivered. After us, he went on loan to Coventry City in League Two, same division, helped them get promoted, ended up playing 3 times, disappeared, then played National League for Wrexham and Leyton Orient, was part of the Leyton Orient team that was actually promoted from the National League into League Two, but since then he's just bounced between the National League and the National League South. And the last time, or the last season, he was playing for Weymouth in the National League South. It really feels like a player who has frittered away his ability, so to speak, but looked to have so much potential. He's just never, ever realised it. Now, there may be some who disagree slightly with this, but at 8, I'm going with the loan signing from this season, Saxon Early. Now, I expected when Saxon came in that he would be challenging for the left wing back position. Dylan Duffy had his gambling issue early doors. Rico Hackett was injured at the time. Don Jeffries didn't appear to be a left wing back, so there was scope there for Saxon to step up. We saw him in a couple of EFL Trophy games. He wasn't all that bad, but then he just disappeared. It just completely disappeared, and it's probably the one recruitment miss from last summer. At the moment, I think he was brought in more like probably a James Brown and an Archie Mayer, which makes it a little bit difficult putting him on this list. Maybe should have been a little bit lower, probably 10th. But I just think when he come from a championship team on loan into our division, he was highly thought of before he came to us. He'd obviously had his injury issues. There was a little bit of ambiguity about whether or not, whether he was injured, was he fit, was he available? Obviously, he picked up 2 bookings and ruled himself out of an EFL Trophy game that he would have then could have appeared in for us. So I think it was just all these different factors combining that made it really difficult for Saxon to ever get going. But he was certainly a loan signing that I would class as disappointing. He is low down on the list. He perhaps should be lower. If I'm honest, maybe should have been 9th or 10th. But that's the way it is. I've set the top 10. He's number 8, Saxon Early. I've got to pick Jordan Garrick. So in the 2022-23 season, we borrowed Jordan Garrick. We borrowed, Morgan Whittaker from Swansea, and Plymouth borrowed Jordan Garrick from Swansea. And the following season, we got Garrick and they got Whittaker. And there was some of our fans who were saying they thought that we had got a better deal. I think it's partly that comparison that's put Jordan on this list. Played 16 times for the Imps, scoring once, which was in the League Cup against Barrow. A late equaliser, I believe, if I remember correctly, which actually helped us get through the next round and then go on our little cup run. So perhaps a tiny, tiny bit harsh. But in the 14 or 15 other games that he played, he did very little. He looked like he'd got all the right attributes. He was physical, he was strong, he was quick. He'd come from a championship club. You expected some sort of raw ability. We wanted him to be a little bit powerful. We wanted him to be pushing forward. We wanted him to replace a Morgan Whittaker figure. He was a relatively big signing for us, a relatively marquee signing. It was him upon which we were pinning quite a few of our hopes under Mark Kennedy in that first season. The fact is that Jordan Garrick, when he came to Lincoln City, was very, very poor indeed, which puts him onto this list. He's since gone on to play for Forest Green, where he experienced successive relegations. He then left for Oldham, went back to Forest Green, but he's ended up playing his trade in the National League. So for coming on loan to a League One side and then ending up going into the National League just a couple of years later kind of underlines the trajectory. And unfortunately, that trajectory was downwards, and he simply passed through us like a dodgy prawn curry. Morgan Whittaker, though, whatever happened to him? At 6th on our list is the winger stroke attacker Bernard Mensah. Now, Mensah was a former Watford youngster, played a couple of times in the Championship. He'd been on loan at Braintree, Barnet, and then in the National League, the year that we were challenging at the top and won the title, like McGuire Drew, he was a really good player for one of our rivals, Aldershot Town. He scored 13 goals in 47 games for them, playing out wide. Got 4 in 17 or 4 in 14 league games the following season, and that earned him a move to Bristol Rovers. At Bristol Rovers, he appeared just 9 times, but at that point, he's loaned to us. So you've got a player here who had thrived in the National League, had stepped up to League One, hadn't quite made it at League One level, and was taking a dip back down. Now, this, remember once again, is our title-winning season. So this is where we had a little bit to spend, to be fair, on the back of the EFL trophy run. We were bringing some loan players in to bolster the squad. Mensah was coming in to bolster the squad. We had some very good players that season, by the way. Out wide, the likes of Andrade and the likes of Harry Anderson. So it was going to be really tough for a player like Mensah to succeed. But when given a chance, you have to show up and do something. And unfortunately, he didn't. He played 4 League Two games, completely blank games they were. Can't remember anything of note, particularly, that he did. He played 4 games for us in the EFL trophy, and again came up completely short. Which, in you're playing Scunthorpe, Wolves under 21s or Accrington, like Sam Slocombe, you're expected to probably do something, probably show some sort of quality. In fairness, all 4 of his league appearances came from the bench. He was expected maybe to be an impact sub, a little bit of pace, a little bit of trickery. We didn't really see any of that either. So Mensah's loan in the end was cut short. He ended up spending the rest of the season in the National League with Aldershot, where he scored 4 in 16. But since then, he's bounced between the National League and the National League North. And was last known, I think, playing for Redditch United in the SL Premier Division Central, whatever that is. So again, unfortunately, somebody who did disappoint during his Lincoln City loan spell. Number 5, Tyrese John Jules. We're probably talking circumstance a little here, because Tyrese John Jules was particularly unlucky for one main reason. That's that he was replacing Tyler Walker. He did actually the only game that Tyrese John Jules actually scored for Lincoln in. Tyler Walker was part of the squad. It was the game against Blackpool, the first game of the new season, or the first game of the transfer window, straight after he had signed. He came on, he scored. For a brief moment, I thought, will we have John Jules and Walker up top? Walker had been scoring all the goals. There was hints that he was going to return to Forest. John Jules comes in. Are they going to be a pairing? No, Walker left. John Jules then had the weight of expectation on his shoulders, and we never really saw any output since then. He got his first goal, and after that, he did more or less disappear. He missed a couple of sitters. He really struggled to make an impact. It was a tough time, bear in mind, for Lincoln City at that point. We had a huge squad turnover in that winter window. There was lots of young players coming in, like Anthony Scully, like Teo Eden, like TJ Omer, who didn't get to play. We got Tom Hopper, who signed for us. John Akindi left. Michael O'Connor left. Connor Coventry came in on loan. It was just a crazy time. And Tyrese John Jules, I think, was a victim of that kind of unsettling uncertainty around the club. COVID then came and claimed his opportunity from him to play more games. He was injured in the March just before COVID, actually. And when there was talk of us resuming the season, there was talk that he might even play again for Lincoln, but he did not. And so he came away from his Lincoln City loan spell with 7 games and 1 goal. Now, since then, he's actually only scored 9 goals in the from 2020 right the way through to 2025. He's played for Doncaster Rovers, where he scored 5, to be fair. Blackpool, where he didn't score. Sheffield Wednesday, where he only played once. Ipswich, he went on loan. He only scored 3 in 17. Derby on loan. And last season, Crawley on loan. 25 blank games for Crawley. Irrespective of what he's done since, I think his loan spell at Lincoln was really disappointing. I think it was hard for him to come in and try and replace Tyler Walker. He was also billed as quite a big potential player at Arsenal. We thought, if he's going to get in at the Arsenal side, is he kind of that level? Afraid not. So at number 4, we have Jack Vale. Now, he arrived on loan from Blackburn Rovers on deadline day in 2023, and the pressure was heaped on him straight away, because not only was he injured and therefore had to try and get fit and then get into match fitness as well as normal fitness, he also came in at a time when Tyler Walker and Ben House both got injured. So circumstantially, it was really, really tough on Jack Vale when he came in. He did get fit. He came off the bench against Charlton, looked really lively, scored against Notts County in the EFL Trophy, but that is the sum of Jack Vale's Lincoln City career, sadly. And it's a fact that during his Lincoln City spell, he had 2 shots. One was a goal against Cambridge in a game that we won 3-0, and the other was just a shot on target. 2 shots, which is absolutely appalling. He just never really got into the run of things. He had 17 games in total for the Imps, but 2 shots in the league. There was just nothing there from Jack. Since then, he's been on loan to Motherwell and hasn't really done it either. So he's another one of those strikers who arrived with a little bit of less fanfare than the next, certainly the next 2 strikers that I've got on the list, which is why he's the one that's behind them. But he was still a hugely, hugely disappointing loan signing. But circumstantially, things did conspire against him a little bit. Big Dan and Lunderloo. Now, this is the definition of a worst signing not being a bad signing at the time, because Dan and Lunderloo could have had his pick of League One sides in the summer of 2021. He'd appeared for Southampton. He'd got 12 Premier League appearances under his belt for Southampton. Big, strong player. Got even, I think, a goal for them. I think it's Shrewsbury in the FA Cup. They needed him to go out on loan. He was potentially the next big thing. He did come in with Brennan Johnson and Morgan Rogers. Easy to get those mixed up, isn't it? Brennan Rogers, Morgan Johnson. You remember those two. With those having been our loan players the season before. So really tough act to follow. A little bit, I think, like the Jordan Garrick, Morgan Whittaker thing, or the Tyrese Johns, Jules Tyler Walker thing. Sometimes a lone player will struggle on the back of who was in before, Bailey Cadamartri, Joe Taylor. So Dan and Lunderloo had a lot to do in order to cement himself as a popular loan signing. He came injured, I think, early doors. He played against Man United kids too quickly, picked up another injury. So he never really got going. Then when he did get in the side, he was hugely disappointing. Big unit, got the pace, got the power, had a nice touch. You expected him to do so much more, but he seemed to struggle in Michael Appleton's tactical setup. There was talk about him not being happy in playing the kind of the role he was playing, which was very much a lone striker role. He didn't enjoy being the target man. He did really well. Wigan, he was unstoppable. We beat Wigan. He scored. He was brilliant. But in all of the other games, he just wasn't. And it was really frustrating because you could see all the physical attributes were there. All of the skill and the flair and those kind of attributes were there. But what wasn't there, it seemed, was the dare I say, the intelligence to adapt to our system. He just didn't seem to suit what we wanted to do. He didn't seem to pick up the tactical side of Michael Appleton's game, and he ended up having his loan cut short. 21 games and just a single goal. Since then, he's not done bad. 5 goals in 27 on loan at Cheltenham, 2 goals in 34 on loan at Bolton. So when I say not bad, he's not done particularly well. He's now very much a League One footballer. But at the time when we signed him, he was actually quite an exciting signing. So it's not that he was a bad signing, it's that he was one of the worst signings. And those two things are very, very different indeed. Oh, what do I start here? Where do I start here? I don't know what to say. Luke Plange was a player who, he was the club's number one target. He was a player who looked to have what we needed at the time, a little bit of pace going forward. He'd had a decent reputation coming into us, been at Derby, moved to Crystal Palace. He'd had a loan at RWB Molenbeek. And it was just honestly felt like he was a half decent signing. There was a couple of other players I believe we were in for at the time. There was the lad from QPR, I think Sinclair Armstrong. There was a Chelsea striker called Mason Burstow. But Luke Plange was the player that we wanted. He was our number one target. What we did was, in order to secure him and convince him he was going to get games, we sold Tom Hopper without having this deal in the bag, because we were so keen to get somebody else in that we had to get Tom out, who was our captain and our number 9, in order to say to a striker, come to us and do your stuff. That convinced Luke Plange to come to us and do his stuff. I don't know what his stuff was, because while I made out at the beginning, or I stressed at the beginning of this video, that being on this list doesn't make them a bad player, Luke Plange did everything in his power to convince me that he was a bad player at Lincoln. Did he not suit our setup? I don't know. But he didn't even get the chances to score. And the one thing I always say is, if a striker's getting in positions and missing chances, eventually you can hit it. You've got to buy a lottery ticket to win the lottery. But Luke Plange didn't buy a lottery ticket. He didn't even go into the newsagents. There was 9 times out of 10 he was completely and utterly anonymous. It just didn't work. So he left Lincoln. The 22-23 season wasn't a bad season anyway. We finished 11th under Mark Kennedy, but could we have had that final push with a half-decent striker? Potentially. Luke Plange, half-decent, not even that. Since then, he's only actually scored 2 Football League goals. One of them, you know who that was against? Not me, Lincoln. Went to Helsinki, HJK Helsinki, scored 6 goals for them, and most recently was on loan at Motherwell. Hasn't really shown any more glimpses of the talent that we understood that he had when we signed him. And for me, certainly one of the worst loan signings of the EFL era, but not the worst. I like a skillful midfielder. I don't mind if they're a bit lightweight. If they're good on the ball and they've got soft feet, I can handle that. When we signed Tashan Oakey on loan from Stoke City, I was excited. He'd been at Spurs, he'd been part of the England youth setup. Spoke to Mark Kennedy at an event, and he said, "Look, when I was scouting, I kept a little book full of names. Tashan's was one of the names that I wrote in to look out for. So I'm massively behind this signing." He had made a senior appearance for Tottenham in an International Champions Cup in a pre-season match. It was just, I just felt he was an exciting signing. He came on a season-long loan in June 2022. He made his debut on the opening day of the season for us. Didn't look too bad. Didn't particularly impress, but it was a new team. It didn't quite gel. So that was that. I just looked forward to seeing him. And after that, he just progressively got worse. And that sounds hard when you don't have a particularly good starting point, but he did get progressively worse. Now, he did play a role in our FA Cup humbling at Chippenham, which I don't think particularly helped. He only started 6 league games in the end. He became kind of synonymous with the softer side of Mark Kennedy's teams. The Mark Kennedy's team that season was very hard to break down, defensively very strong, nothing really going forward. And Tashan was a supposed attacking player, and he created more or less nothing at all. Come January, he had fallen completely out of favour. Was really struggling for any game time whatsoever. So after the Chippenham game, he made the odd appearance here and there through November, and then he played in the Football League Trophy against Morecambe, the 1-1 draw, November the 22nd, and that was the last time we saw him until the 10th of January, when he was a last-minute substitute again in the Football League Trophy. So he then kind of slipped down to late substitute. positioning. Then in April 2023, this is the reason for me that he gets on this list, because he came on against Barnsley. We were drawing 0-0. Now, this isn't a classic Lincoln City side, by the way. Luke Plange started this game, so that just tells you what sort of level we were at. So Luke Plange had started the game, but Tashan came on. And honestly, it is one of the poorest Lincoln City performances from an individual player I have ever seen. He looked completely and utterly disinterested, gave the ball away 2 or 3 times. I even remarked, why have we brought him on? He just doesn't even look like he wants to be here. He looked like he had contempt for his teammates rather than anything else. I'm sure that's not the case, but it's all about perception. And at that point, it's the first time I've ever questioned a player's actual commitment, actually working against the team. You can question ability, you can question all that sort of stuff, but that game, I thought that Tashan was utterly abysmal. I left the ground. I said, if he ever plays for Lincoln City again, it'll be a disgrace. He didn't ever play for Lincoln City again, but that game, more or less alone, probably puts him over and above Luke Plange. And in my mind, it makes him the worst Lincoln City loan signing of the EFL era. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. Please, if you're a Lincoln City fan and you've stumbled across this by accident, do remember to subscribe. If you like the video, do like it, comment on it, all that sort of stuff, because it does help. Even if you're the guy that always seems to leave negative comments, a negative comment is still a comment and helps the algorithms. So if you think I'm a knob, tell me I'm a knob. If you're a player that's on this list and you're watching this, as I've stressed, I don't think that anybody on here is particularly a bad player, but you had bad spells at Lincoln City, and I think that's fair to say. We had a Patreon only video, which was the worst 10 players that we've signed of the EFL era, actual signings. So you could get that if you are a Patreon. There was an article on the site, but we will be looking at the best as well. We'll be looking at the best 10 loan players to join Lincoln City in the EFL era and the best 10 signings of the EFL era as well. Keep an eye out for those, but in the meantime, up the Imps.